Hey, welcome back to the show. I hope you're all doing really well. I've been on a massive Slayer binge lately and just going through all the riffs, having loads of fun. And I just wanted to test out and see how the Marshall DSL100 goes. I've been really impressed with this amp since I got it, and I just really wanted to see how to go trying to dial in that really sort of hard-hitting Kerry King tone. I know it's totally different than the JCM800s that he uses, but I just wanted to see how it goes all the same. And then I remembered that Softube brought out the Kerry King amp bundle about 5 years ago, where you had the KK2203 amp head, and then it went through two of his Mode 4 412 cabinets with the G12K100 speakers in them. And these are just renowned for like a huge bottom end. They're really tight. They're absolutely savage. They must weigh a ton. The magnets are massive. But anyway, Softube worked with Terry Date and they put them in a studio in Los Angeles and mic'd them all up and made some really cool IRs. And you can even go through and just custom do all your IRs. There's IRs from live concerts and there's IRs that Terry Date has set up that are already EQ'd and just ready to go. But I thought I'd just try all that and just run the DSL through some of those IRs and just see what sort of tones we get. Along with the MXR 10 band or the 6 band, just work out which one is actually better. For years I've really liked the 6, but we'll be testing out the 10 and anyway, let's just get into it. And so quickly for the gear that I'm using today, I've got my Dean Select Vengeance V. This has Seymour Duncan Thrash Factor pickups in it, 10 to 52 string joy strings. I've absolutely just loved the tone of this guitar. I know they're not EMGs, but for some reason this just hits like a truck, and I AMB'd it with the EMGs and I actually just prefer this. So, and that's going through my pedal board where I'm just using the Fortin Zool plus noise gate. It's going through the effects loop as well as the keying key through feature. But essentially we're just using the front end of the MXR 6 and 10 band EQs today. And then that's just going into the amp where the amp is outputting only through the 2 Notes Reload 2 box. I'm not actually using any live speakers in the room today, and that's just absorbing the entire signal from the DSL100, and that's just sending a mono signal into my audio interface into Logic where I'm running the Softube Kerry King amp bundle and just utilizing those IRs for the speakers. But hopefully that makes a lot of sense. It's a way that I can record just silently and it just sounds really cool. And so that just leaves us with the amp, and I really just love the red channel on the lead 1 setting. Out of all the 4 modes that it has, you've got the green channel that's got the clean and crunch. They're both pretty cool and they were better with the JCM 2000, but I think the whole strength with the DSL100, it's that lead 1 channel. Lead 2 gets a little bit too sort of mushy. I covered that in a video the other week. I just don't like it as much. I think it just loses a lot of the clarity and it just, I don't know, the compression or the gain, it just doesn't seem to work for me. But the lead 1, it's immense. And you can see all the settings just there. We'll go through the reverbs lately, but it's got 2 reverbs, 1 for each of the channels. And it's a digital reverb, but they sound really good. But going through, you can see the resonance is really low, as I find this is something on the DSL range that gets overpowering really fast. So I very seldom take it past 9 o'clock. The presence is just before noon, around 4. And as for the tone shift button, I think it's one of those features they should have got rid of when they redesigned the DSL range, just like the deep switch. Just get rid of it. I think it cheapens the whole line, which goes into the bass around noon. The mids I always push on these. It's up around 3. The treble, I just have it backed off between 4 and 5, just really to taste like how's you dialing this amp in. I just try and balance the whole amp out to give a great foundation. The volume I'm pushing a little bit. It's on about 3 or around 3, and then the gain on lead 1 is right at 12 o'clock. And just like that, I think it's a fantastic foundation just for any tone, any pedals going in the front end, using with the effects loop. It's nice and tight, has plenty of punch, and this is the basic amp tone as you hear it with no pedals at all. You can hear it's a little tiny bit thin on those chugs, and it's great for some of those cleaner passages for Slayer. But for most of the Slayer riffs, you just got to add a little bit more hair to that tone just to give, I don't know, it just breaks it up a little bit more and just makes that front end more aggressive. So across the MXR EQs, I'll just turn on the 6 band just to start with, then we'll talk about them a little bit. I'll just loop that through a riff section and we'll just turn it on and off and just change the values, see how it goes. I guess that just shows how I go about getting gain out of the MXR6 band. You've always sort of got to keep that V going on. If you just try and bring up all the levels, it just gets really muddy and horrible. But if you just sort of focus on those mids, like the 4/800 sort of hertz, you just really sort of get into that realm of like the Slayer-esque tone. It's got to be like a frown. It's not meant to be happy. But comparing the 800 to the DSL, there's a lot more gain going on here, so I don't have to drive the EQs in hard as much. I really am just creating that sort of aggression on the top. But the MXR6, I find as you feed in more of those mids, it really just adds like a distortion to the tone, like an overdrive element to it. And that overdrive element, like the clipping in that way, it's different to how the MXR10 band operates. And for years I've preferred the actual 6 because I like the distortion that you get out of that. But comparing that to the 10 now, as for the 10 band, it needs 18 volts of power rather than just the 9 volts, so you can't just use a battery with it. And as for all the 10 bands of EQ that you have there to adjust, I find that the outer ones are totally redundant, as the guitar just doesn't need those super high end or the really heavy bass frequencies going on. I think it's an EQ that'd be great for all instruments, like having a bass or things you can really focus on where your instrument lies. But for a guitar, it's not needing that whole bandwidth. So the MXR6, in my opinion, just takes up less space. It just seems to distort really well. But the 10 band does actually have a few extra features, which is cool. It's got the 2 outs, so you can drive it into 2 different heads, which is fantastic. And you've got the gain slider on the side, and Kerry always just like set up his EQs just like the Arrowhead, like I have it set. And then depending on the venue, he would just change the slider and just like feeding the amount of gain. And something I was thinking about with these, as you turn up the gain slider, I think most people are under the impression that all the sliders just seem to move up like virtually with the slider going up and down. Whereas I think if you happen to have a lot of them lower and you turn up the gain, you'll get like a different style of saturation rather than just turning up all the sliders. I'll just try that theory out, just playing along. I could be totally wrong, but we'll just see how it goes. Those riffs are so fun to play, but it's actually really cool being able to loop the sections, go back and then just tweak it to my ears as I think that I should hear it. Often when I'm just playing on my own, I have the gains a lot lower than I think they need to be when I go back and listen to them, but I just really like that definition and punch when I'm just playing along. But this is actually really cool. I'm enjoying it. I like the gain slider. And I'm actually really impressed too with the IRs and the Kerry King bundle. It's just, they seem to be really hard hitting and great sounding speakers, and it's a really realistic IR. I feel it's really got that Slayer vibe to it as soon as I plugged in. So it's a really honest tone as well. I think it really relies upon the way you play the guitar, and the accents of your playing actually shine through with this tone. I think it just complements it, but it hasn't really changed over the years, his tone. I think that's awesome. They've stayed true to their roots. But even for the more modern stuff, oh, and if I didn't muck that up at the end, I probably would have just kept on playing. It sounds just so cool. It's just so sort of guttural and punishing. But I think if we add some reverb to that, and you can even utilize this tone if you just go to the neck pickup and just like clean it right up if you back that off. But if we give that some reverb, I've just turned it up fully actually. And again, those riffs are just so fun to play, and I think this tone just nails it. I've always loved Slayer, and I just think like they're the soundtrack to the horror movies. I've always been a fan of like older horror movies, all the things like The Exorcist. I just absolutely love those movies, and this to me, it's just like all those riffs are so demonic. You don't need ultimate saturation in riffs and like super high end gear to get all these massive aggressive tones. You can just do it basically just with a really raw Marshall and just have loads of fun, jam it with your mates. It's just great times. I know Gary Holt used the Marshall DSLs with Slayer for a little while. He just couldn't get his head around Jeff's rig and used these for a few shows. He thought they were killer, but then he moved on to the Jubilees, like they just fitted him better. But I get that. They would have just done perfectly for this. But anyway, guys, I really hope you enjoyed the show. That's Softube Kerry King IRs. You don't just necessarily use the VST amp. You can just use the IRs with live amps, have a great tone. Like, just, it's absolutely kick ass. But look, until next time, guys, take care. Bye-bye.